What's up, YouTube? This is the 82 and 0 podcast. Continuing on, I want to talk about Bill Russell. Now, it's kind of unfortunate how, with time, he's become the most disrespected player in history. And I've been talking to a subscriber of mine about Bill Russell, and, you know, we both feel it's unfair how players of the past are just being lied about. So I just kind of wanted to use this time to talk about why I feel he's underrated and why some of the myths about him are not true. I want to start with the first misconception about him. A lot of people who don't know much about this era, they say Bill Russell didn't have any competition. They say he only played with 8 teams. Now, I did a video kind of covering this, but look at it like this, right? In the 80s, the late 80s, there were, I think, 23 teams in 86, right? And by 96, there were 29 teams, I want to say. So look at it like this, right? That means there's 6 extra teams that were added to the league. That's 72 slots for less talented players to fill. And these are players who would have been cut off at training camps in the 80s. You get what I'm saying? So there's a lot of really bad teams today that are just stuck in mediocrity at best because they're not able to build anything because they can't draft a quality player because there's too many other teams, And during Russell's time, I know a lot of people are going to say, well, he wasn't competitive. He won 11 championships. But the teams back then were very deep. Very, very, very deep. Because, like I said, there's 30 teams right now. Imagine you take 22 teams and delete them from existence, right? They fold. So the 8 remaining teams, they have a dispersal draft with those other players. You might see a team that has like LeBron and Dame Lillard and Kyrie or fucking Davis, and you get what I'm saying. They're just gonna be deep. So when people talk about the Celtics, they had so many Hall of Famers. Yeah, it's because during the time, only the best of the best players in I want to say America wasn't quite global yet could be on a team, And this isn't just true about the Celtics. The St. Louis Hawks, which are now the Atlanta Hawks, they had Bob Pettit, Ed McCauley, Slater Martin, Cliff Hagan, Clyde Levitt, and Lenny Wilkins. Those are some Hall of Famers for you. Oh, and there's a myth going around. Oh, the Warriors with Wilt, they just didn't have the talent to compete. That's not true. Wilt had a lot of good Hall of Fame teammates, and I think I've even heard him say that in an interview that if I can't remember where it's at, someone wants to put the link down below. But I remember there was an interview with Wilt where they asked him, what's the biggest misconception about you? And he said that I didn't have good teammates. I played with a lot of Hall of Famers. And just that Warriors team alone, players that Russell would have played were like Neil Johnston, Paul Arizin, Tom Gola, Wilt, obviously, Nate Thurman, Rick Barry. And then, think about the Sixers, Red Kerr, Dolph Schayes, Hal Greer, Frank Costello, Billy Cunningham, and Wilt was on that team later. Think about the Lakers, Vern Mickelson, Elgin Baylor, Cherry West, Gail Goodrich. Or the Royals, Oscar Robertson, Jack Twyman, Jerry Lucas. So these are just to name a few good teams. But, and then there's another misconception about the height of that era. A lot of people, you hear this, oh, he only played against 5'6" white centers. That's why he was so good. That's just not true. The league average height in the 1960s, okay, and if somebody want to fact check me, go ahead. It's all documented. The league average height in the 1960s was 6'6". You know what it is today? 6'6". You know what the average center height was back then? Specifically 1962, 6'10". You know what it is today? 6'10". So let's stop blowing out of proportion the competition he played. And I was mentioning Hall of Famers. I didn't even mention Willis Reed. I didn't even mention Zomo Beatty. Walt Bellamy. Wes Unseld towards the end of Bill Russell's career. Elvin Hayes towards the end of his career. He played a lot of good bigs. Bob Pettit. So, and a lot of people will say that the centers I listed, they weren't all that good, but they're all Hall of Fame centers, the guys I mentioned. Now, let me make this argument, right? So, like I said, when there's less teams and every night you got to play a different Hall of Fame center. You know what I mean? So if you only have 8 teams to play, you're going to play them a lot more during the regular season. Wilt and Russell played each other over 100 times. I think it's like 173 times in their career. Guys today aren't playing each other like that. There will be, I'll just use Giannis, for example. He seems to be the best player in the league. There might be nights where Giannis is beating the shit out of a poor expansion team. It might be a few games before he gets a good team, but Russell had to bring his A game every night because he might play the Knicks one night with Willis Reed, next night play maybe the Sixers with Wilt, or on the Lakers, whatever you want to go with. Or, he might be playing Walt Bellamy, Zomo Beatty. Earlier on, he might be playing guys like Bob Pettit, Ray Felix, So it's kind of blown out of proportion how weak this era was. Now, people say, oh, it wasn't competitive. They won 11 championships. But look at it like this, right? No other dynasty had played in that many Game 7s. Bill Russell played in 11 Game 7s. And he had many, many games. 1957 comes to mind. It was a 2-overtime, 2-point win against the St. Louis Hawks in Game 7. He had a chase down block. Or 69 finals, they won by 2 points. Or, the 62 finals. They were close. I'm sorry. How do you say it's not competitive when he plays in all these elimination games? All right? And these elimination games come down to the wire. There were many games that were decided by less than 5 points. And Russell also came back from a 3-1 deficit in 1968 against Wilt Chamberlain. So I don't like this argument, oh, it wasn't competitive, Because, the same people that will say that, well, I'm mainly talking about the 2010s when I came up. A lot of people would say, oh, it was much more competitive. It's much more competitive today. But in that era, in the 2010s, you had the Warriors and Cavs going to the finals 5 years in a row against each other. Or 4, I'm sorry. 4 years in a row against each other. But then they'll sit there and be like, oh, the 60s only had Russell going to the finals every year. But The 2010s had LeBron going to 8 straight finals. Well, that's cool. That's competitive. But Russell making 8 finals? No, that's not competitive. Do you see the hypocrisy? And some of these finals in the 2010s weren't even close. Look at 2018, 2017. Come on. So I think it's really blown out of proportion. The size, as I mentioned, they say the league wasn't as big back then. They were just these prehistoric dinosaurs. It's bullshit. I think it's blown out of proportion too that he didn't have competition because he played a lot of Hall of Famers, that he didn't have any adversity to winning these championships. And look at it like this, right? They say Bill Russell only won because of his teammates, right? But if this is true, how come the roster kept changing around him? He won. He's the only one that was there for all 11 championships. Even the coach wasn't there. Red Auerbach for the last couple championships. So, if this is true, how come it was able to change around him and he kept winning? He won 6 championships with Cousy. He won a bunch with John Havlicek. Sam Jones might be the only one that's... I should say he won 6 with Havlicek. But Sam Jones might be the closest one. He won 10. He was there for 10 of them. But the point I'm trying to make is, how come when he was out, right? Because he missed a 4-game stretch in 1962. They went 0 for 4. He missed a 5-game stretch in 1969. They went 0 for 5. How come he only won because of his teammates? But before he got there, if this is such a great team, right? This all-time great team, how come they didn't win any championships before him? Right? He filled the void they needed. They needed a defensive anchor down low. And is it a coincidence they start winning when they draft him? Because they had a good roster before he was there. Bob Cousy, Bill Sharman. Tom Heinsohn was drafted the same year he was. But at the end of his career, too, right? 69-70 season, right after he retires. How come they plummet to being one of the worst teams in the league after he retires? He had a lot of win shares, whether you want to admit it or not. He's the reason the team won. I don't think the Celtics would have. I'm gonna say this, right? I don't think the Celtics would have won a single championship in the 50s or 60s had Russell not played. And people say, well, what made him so good? People forget how good of an athlete he was. Because when he was in the Olympics, right, in 1956, he was, I think it was in Sydney, Australia. He competed in the high jump, right? And he was ranked the 7th best high jumper in the world. And the 3rd best in America, I believe. So it said he had like a 44 to 45 inch vertical. That's kind of like what LeBron has. So he has LeBron's athleticism, and you got to factor in he would play almost every minute of every night. He was a guy that would play 45 minutes a night usually. He had the So this is why it's so fucking stupid when you see guys today saying, oh, they wouldn't be able to play the guys back then wouldn't be able to play today. You're telling me these motherfuckers back then, this is the fastest paced era ever. Not today. I know today is fast paced, but back then it was very, very, very fast paced. You're telling me this guy could play every minute of every night, run up and down the court hundreds of times, right? But he can't play today. When guys are coming into training camp overweight, James Harden, Luka Doncic, Zion Williams. Oh, but the players back then were just dinosaurs. They were just plumbers. Fucking idiots. So you're telling me Russell couldn't play today? Well, it's not just his athleticism, right? It's his defense. He's the all-time leader in defensive win shares. He's probably up there as the greatest defender of all time. So this is honestly my assessment of Russell. He's got the athleticism of LeBron James. He's got the rebounding ability of Dennis Rodman. He's got the shot blocking ability of Ben Wallace. He's got, believe it or not, he could play perimeter defense too, like a Gary Payton. And he's got the same competitive fire that Michael Jordan had. You're telling me this guy wouldn't be able to play today? It's fucking stupid. So, I don't understand, man. Someone's got to explain it to me. He wasn't just a dude that happened to be tall. If that's true, how come there's so many 6'10" to 7-footers in the league history that aren't shit? How many 6'10" guys have not made it, right? You know what I mean? I'll just name some, right? Brian Scalabrine, 7-footer, right? Todd McCullough, I think that's how you say his name on the Nets back in the day. Zaza Pachulia. If you're so big, why don't you just dominate? Right? If you're 7 foot, why don't you just dominate? Do you see what I'm saying? It takes more than just being tall to dominate. You got to have the mindset. You got to have the athleticism. You got to have the drive. So I don't want to hear this argument ever again. He only dominated because he was big. These are the same motherfuckers that will say, Steph Curry is only good because he shoots. No shit, Sherlock. That's the point of the game, to score. So those are my misconceptions I wanted to break down in this video about Bill Russell. You know, we need to show these older players more respect for the game. More respect because, you know, they won't be with us for much longer. And I think it's important we hear their stories, you know. But the problem with people today is they don't give a fuck about anything they haven't seen. It's cool to them to not know about shit. I don't understand it. It's cool for them to act like experts about eras they've never watched. And they'll just listen to a guy like Colin Cowherd talk about how trash these eras were that he didn't even see. You know? So, this is my defense video of Bill Russell. He's no doubt in my mind top 10 player of all time. Greatest defensive player of all time. No, he didn't play in a weak era. No, players weren't shorter on average back then. So let me know what you guys think down below. Thanks for watching.